All righty, good afternoon. Welcome to the Monday, September 18th, Government Operations Committee meeting. Welcome everybody to the room. We got three topics today. And I'd like to get someone to motion to approve the last August 21st meeting minutes.
All motion to approve.
And second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, now we have one topic that we need to finish up at our last voting meeting back in this month. We put on hold for further review of department fees, and we have there were just some concerns about the rate. And thank you, staff, for going and doing some research. And I'll kick it off to Mr. Edmonds.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davenport. Central Services staff took y'all's feedback and they went and looked at benchmark communities potentially that have parklets and what they're charging. And so y'all decided at the voting meeting to hold fees at the current rate into to the end of this fiscal year. And so staff, Andrew Saunders and Angel Helmley from Central Services are bringing forward some options. And so Andrew's going to walk us through the four potential options that staff see. And then we can answer the questions you have about the benchmarks that were provided as well by Angel. With that, I'll kick it to y'all.
Okay. So the current part, let's start with this document actually. This is just some options for you all to consider. Option one is the current fee structure that's been approved and is shown in our fee schedule. Option two is the fees that were recommended by this body last time that maybe had some questions from the broader commission. You'll see that in comparison to the blue bar, the goal was to somewhat bring it in line with average parking revenues. So really, and I'm sorry, there's already a typo, but option three, bottom left, one option you could consider is just kind of in between, which ends up being about 75% of market pricing. And then I brought for you an option four, which is also listed as option three. It's in the bottom right corner. And so what I did here was a little of this, a little of that. So it would retain the highly discounted structure for the first two spaces. It then achieves 75% of income recovery on the third space. And if you would like all four spaces, you would be asked to pay full parking recovery. And the idea behind that being, heard some discussion in the commission about parklets being an amenity downtown and something that they didn't want to disincentivize, but we also don't necessarily want everybody to rush to four spaces. And I would also say, maybe pulling up the other example, Angel was able to help put together some information from parklets in other cities. There's a lot of apples and oranges. For example, some cities fully fund their own parklets as like a community amenity, but then there's not exclusive use. And so, Angel, if you'll just quickly take us through what you found.
Okay. So 4 of these places don't allow you to have it up for the entire 12 months. So the stuff has to be moved out after their time period is up. There were several cities that I contacted that paid for the parklets themselves with grants and things like that. Like one city had like a $250,000. I wish I would have kept notes about who did that, but unfortunately I didn't. One city had like a $250,000 grant they got from somewhere, so they went out and put parklets in. But they were for everybody to use, not just individual businesses. I did contact some other cities that some people may have mentioned specifically. Like I did try to get information from Asheville, and they were doing away with their parklet program. I contacted Hendersonville, North Carolina, and they said they only had one, and they weren't doing anything bigger than that.
Why is Asheville being moved?
I don't know. Getting in touch with these people is very difficult. I've looked on their website. I tried calling. I tried emailing, and this is no joke. Out of the 6, I probably left messages at 6 different places. Only one city returned my call.
Yeah.
So
tired of talking about them too.
Right. So unfortunately, I don't know why some of this is, happened like that, but yeah, I did make the effort. I looked online, then I tried to call the cities, I tried to email the cities, and only one returned my call or message. So, this is all I was able to gather in that time frame.
Commissioner Hammond, we had talked, can you talk about, can you do the breakdown for parking downtown?
Yeah, and I think Andrew has this in the blue option down here. And I just make it, just one thing clear, all these dollars they don't go to the ADDA, they go to the government, for parklets, and ADDA doesn't receive any of them. And I'll say this, even at the lower price, there hasn't been an interest, in the program here in town. I mean, I think, what we saw happen with the build out of a couple of them led us to re-examine this and led us to re-examine the price. I mean, we're about to talk about leasing to nonprofits who are doing some work in our community, and we're going to charge them, but we're not, I mean, if I had to fall somewhere, I'd fall on the option 4 that these folks have put together for us. I mean, they've obviously done the work in looking at it. They've recognized that, if the folks that are renting these spaces are having to pay indoor space, they're going to be paying a lot more money than we're charging them. These are for-profit businesses doing this, and I'm glad we're doing the program. Also recognize that we need to be fair to the folks that own the property, and that's the folks in this community. So I mean, they're not making. At the end of the day, it's not that big of a difference. And option 3 still allows for you to get the 2 spaces at $2,000.
Is this annually or quarterly?
So this is listed as annual.
Okay.
So option 3 still allows you to get those 2 spaces at the $2,000, and then when you need more than that, it just makes sense that it would go up incrementally.
Any other commissioners input?
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Dex.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, I agree. I think that I like that option. It maintains a fairly affordable rate, give people access, that little bit of space. And if you want to go all out, you pay for it, because you definitely are going to make more money seating people. But I feel like that I like that option 4. I think that's a good approach.
I like option 4. I do want to know if we do stick with option 4, how much less would we get from downtown parking? Did we pack that in?
It's right. Yeah. I mean, he's got a bar chart, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's the difference between 2 and 4, I think. So
Currently you have 2 4-space parklets and 1 2-space parklet. Correct?
Yes, 2 4-space and 1 2.
So if you went with option 4, that total program subsidy over parking would be about $4,500. But it would actually be generating $12,000 more than you do now. Because right now, everything is below market rate.
And keep in mind too, option 3, if you just had the 2 spaces, this would be less than what you would be able to, I mean, if you're doing construction and renting a spot downtown, it's going to be $10 a day.
Right.
So it's $3,650 a year. So this is actually less than that.
Okay.
A lot less, because that's just for 1 space. Make a motion to approve option 4.
I'll say it.
So this going to the full mayor commission?
And we're not going to change our mind once we get there, right?
just one clarifier is, is that as of July 1st? Because
Yeah.
the way we okay.
Well,
Or do you want someone to share along those lines?
well, we can do that. I just would, the permits run annually. So what that would end up doing is we would have option 1 fee structure for the first 2 quarters and option 4 fee structure for the next 2 quarters. So
So what do you want us to do?
it is simpler to do option 4 starting on January 1st, although that will be a fairly large increase for two current permit holders. So
Well, we've given them enough time to recognize that that's.
this would be in the October voting meeting. So that would give them about 90 days notice.
Is that fair? I mean,
So it's up to y'all.
I mean,
I mean,
I just want, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry. What's the current permit cycle? Is it calendar year or fiscal
It
year?
is.
Ah, I see.
That's what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
no, I think that makes total sense then.
Or we could just change it during the budget process and the way that we talk about it with the leasees, current ones, in the permit, we'll just have to say it's gonna change July 1, so yes, it's up to you.
Yeah, January 1st, motion,
it's July 1st, July 1st.
He made the motion.
somebody second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, on to the next topic is the, CBA and the leasing policy. Edward, can you kick us off?
Yes, so we've talked about the leasing policy a couple times, and we're coming back, for further discussion. We've heard some of y'all's feedback, and Andrew pulled together a tool that we sent out on Friday for y'all to contemplate potential tiers of funding to see the impacts that had on specific facilities. So we just wanted to have a conversation today to see what y'all thought about that tool, to see if there's any ideas you had in terms of what that rate might be. But this is really a tool that we thought would be helpful for you as you thought about those different levels of the tiers. So this is the option that y'all seem to coalesce around at the last meeting.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank the staff for putting together. I really want to thank Attorney Sherry Hines, for narrowing this morning. I'm gonna push back a little bit though. I still first stand with $1 lease for these nonprofits. We've been doing it for years. Hadn't had, any complaints. I just think it's just the right thing to do. They provide so much of benefit to this community, and I just think we need to stick with the $1. Understand the legal ramifications of that, but I just think we can stick with the $1. So that's one man's opinion.
so I have a question. That Excel document, is that information on that Excel document? Because it's not showing up on mine.
So you're on the instructions tab, but if you go over to the second tab, it is the interactive code.
So for me, I like option B. Here's my spiel for option B and not charging the current lease amount. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of the cost, the life cycle cost. So if you look at the 1, 2, 3, fourth column, let's look at the Mary Moore Athens tutorial. The upcoming 5-year life cycle cost is $7,000. So right now with $1 lease, a monthly lease, like $12 a year, that's a huge benefit, but it's a burden for the taxpayer. I just say, if legal reason, it would be fair to at least pay something to help us, with the maintenance, the painting, the yard work, and the lighting and stuff like that. But if you look at the 2019 lease prior, some of those businesses were paying before the it's not on here, but it's an older document. But some of the entities were paying rent before 2019. But that's my spiel.
And Commissioner, I believe that's shown in the fifth column.
Fifth column.
It's their prior lease.
Commissioner, if you mind, I'm gonna piggyback on Commissioner Fisher here. And, y'all, I mean, if I'm looking at that bottom number, I can't see that far away, but for the some 5-year life cycles, $387,000. We spent a little bit less than that on the toilet downtown. So my point is, these groups in here are doing some good work for our community, and I think that's well worth what we're paying to keep the buildings up and to maintain them. And so I just I'm trying to figure out what's broke that we're trying to fix. And I just, I'm not fully realizing that yet. So I'm like Dexter. I'm in favor of just keeping it $1 and if something changes over the next year or so, then maybe we can come back to it. But for now, I think we got something in place and let's stick with it.
And maybe that's a question you can ask. What triggered all this initially? Is it triggered because of the law or something initially? As you all know, it was so, some people were paying $1, some people weren't. So what triggered all this now to get to where we maybe need to push fair or something?
Commissioner Parker, noticed that the white entities were paying $1 and then the black entities were paying a substantial amount. So to be fair, everybody went to $1.
But we started talking about changing it all of a sudden.
Yeah,
So the GOC created a policy probably a couple years ago that hasn't been implemented yet.
But I guess what I'm saying is, let's keep it at $1 for a while longer, because when the black organizations start talking, or when they start wanting $1 as well, is all of a sudden we're going to change it to something else.
And I think it wasn't called rent, it was called maintenance fee.
Yeah.
And it was a monthly fee based on how much it costs to upkeep those particular facilities. But like, like the Taylor Grady House, they were paying a benefit, and NBC did not.
They were having fun too. Right.
Yeah. So, and that's when we came up with the community benefits agreement to get some transparency on and so how these entities were actually benefiting the community.
And I don't want to discount the work that you guys have done as far as putting together a community benefits agreement, but this is I think we all can recognize the community benefit the cottage brings, and and the town and gown theater. I mean, I just don't think now's a good time to be monkeying about with this.
I mean, I feel like the community benefits agreement is necessary just to have a transparent statement as to the services that these entities are providing.
But they get the $1 rent.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm going with it. I really feel like that agreement is important.
So I think
out there.
But that's really why it came back, y'all. So y'all hadn't implemented it, which was one thing, but the attorney's office had major concerns about the CBA and the legality of it. So I think if you want to keep rents at $1, I think there's some things we'd have to iron out. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Sherry or John.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the community benefits agreement, I think the problem that we identified is how do you actually implement that? Because fundamentally, if you make it fairly broad, then basically any nonprofit in the community can check a box and say, I provide a substantial public benefit. And so how do you differentiate between different nonprofits? And then also we were concerned that this community benefits agreement that, for instance, puts a burden on staff to determine who qualifies without any guidelines could be considered arbitrary. And so that's why we wanted to come back and have this conversation. And so there's certainly a benefit from a legal perspective to go with something like this, which has a flat tier method and doesn't involve kind of analysis of benefit, because fundamentally doing that analysis of whether someone provides community a benefit to the community is difficult. So I mean, I think you're right. It's certainly easy, like with the cottage, but like the Hancock Development. Sorry, remember the name of that organization?
Hancock Community Development Board.
Right. So there might be a question of, well, how do you compare that entity and what it does for the community? I can't answer those questions.
But Sherry, what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that just if we can still maintain $1, just don't have a community benefit.
Well, I think I just referred you to the letter that we sent this morning about the dollar leases. I think that's where the advice about that is. Okay. That's a confidential document.
I think the community benefit has to be determined somehow. Now, the other thing I would say about the dollar lease is not all of these are the same. If a leasee is generating revenue, maybe they're not handled the same as one that's a nonprofit that's not generating revenue, that's producing public good. Without generating revenue. And that was one of the things that we weighed back and forth in the old policy as well. like Taylor Grady, they're gonna be making money at some point. Do we want to give somebody who's gonna be making money $1 a lease? That's up to y'all. But I think there could be levels here. It doesn't have to be every facility is $1. So I think you could do $1. We have to have a way to determine the public good, and y'all have to be able to vote on that. But we also have to recognize that maybe some of these aren't necessarily the same as the others.
I totally agree with you, Josh.
So how do we as a GLC break this down? The CBA, it's confusing. It's very confusing. But how do we break it down to where the smaller nonprofits that are not generating money, they just want to do good for the community versus the nonprofits that are generating a substantial amount of money? How do we fix that CBA to accommodate that scenario?
And I mentioned this earlier when I was GOC, when I was working for the school district, we had similar issues. Everybody wanted to use our facilities. They were nonprofit, trying to use our facilities for free. What we did then, what we got together with our attorney, well, I had my staff come up with there, okay, if you are property, for example, you say, well, I'm doing a dance class, I'm charging X number of dollars. You're gonna pay to use our facility. But if you're doing a dance class for free, I mean, so I think we can distinguish that with, okay, if you, as a nonprofit, are generating income for your nonprofit, then that could be, then we make that determination, what should we charge that nonprofit that they're generating, producing nonprofit? And that's how we got around it. Again, I know some things do, but that's what I came and said, look, if these nonprofits gonna come to us and want to use our facility, if they're charging people in the community to bring their kids and stuff, then you're gonna charge and pay for use our facility. So to me, I think, and you correct me, y'all really expert. I think that's the honest way to do it. And then the nonprofit is not doing it, like Commissioner Danforth is doing good for the community. People coming there for free, they're doing the work, and then this is what you pay.
Can we differentiate in that manner?
So I think you could, but I think there may be some unintended consequences because, for instance, Town and Gown charges for their events and also rents out the facility. I don't know what kind of income that's bringing in, but
I think it goes back to helping them with their mission. I mean, certainly the Heritage Foundation rents out or does something, the Heritage.
To be fair, Taylor Grady would say the same thing, both the past lessee and the current one.
Right.
So it's just a question of.
Well, some of us knew. I think you have to set some guidelines. And again, it don't take all of us to vote on and make a decision, and we don't need to make it today and make a plan. But I think, though, for me, even if it's Taylor Grady House or the theater, moving forward, these are things. And again, I don't think we need to go overboard with what we charge them, but come up with a fee that we think might be a little bit respectful. It won't break them.
How about option 4?
I'm not want to burden those nonprofits because they do good work. But where can we come to a middle ground, charge those ones that are.
There's also the question of, the maintenance for each of these facilities. They're drastically different facilities. A heck of a lot more to keep up the Taylor Grady house than,
Town and Gown.
Yeah. Well, and Town and Gown, they've invested a lot in the facility itself. Like, from what I understand, they actually built it. It was built specifically for Town and Gown with donor dollars, and all the equipment in there is all Town and Gown.
Can I clarify that real quickly? I just wanted to be clear. We pulled the minutes, and so the person who, I guess, built the facility actually built it with the intent, I believe, that it would be a leisure services facility, and that Town and Gown would get use of it for their normal, I think 6 is what it says, events per year. But it was certainly not built with the intent for the minutes of being exclusively utilized.
So they were dug up.
I have them if you'd like to see it.
So, was that donated into the county?
Yeah, so the county owned the land, and basically a local developer offered to build the theater so long as the city committed to giving them first right of refusal, so to speak.
Exactly.
Done enough?
I
Yeah.
could email it to everyone if you would like to see it.
The county doesn't maintain the interior of the facility.
Well, I mean, so we maintain core systems, right? We do not do anything with their lighting. We don't do anything with the stage and the props. I don't even think we do anything with the seating. We have a commitment for HVAC. We have roof. It's like it's in our life cycle program. And if they sprint a leak, it'd be our folks who respond to provide those services. Town and gown, my understanding per their conversations and talking with our staff, some of that they have taken on themselves. So like, I think they did at one point pay to replace an HVAC unit. Maybe there just wasn't good cross dialogue there, understanding that we wouldn't support it. But they don't receive, I guess what I say is they do not receive a different level of service than anybody else.
And then also consider that some of these entities, like maybe other than two, are receiving government funds. We do CDBG, we give it intergovernment agency funds every year. So not all of this time they charging most of these entities $1 rent. We're also funding them. Just keep that in mind,
But we've also gone up on their insurance and other things like that take away from the folks who are trying to serve. And I hope Andrew's not screaming on the inside because he's done a lot of work on this. And
I think we're just looking for you all to have a fee structure you're comfortable with, that the attorney's office supports, and that we can convey to these end users. Because it has been challenging to not have been able to settle on one, and to always kind of go into these 6-month extensions creates a lot of administrative work for both our tenants and us.
I mean, maybe the most straightforward way to do it is to go with the dollar lease, but actually determine the actual maintenance costs for each specific facility.
I think he's got that.
Well, so that's,
Is that,
no, what's shown there is only capital reinvestment.
I get you.
Our maintenance is actually would include landscape services for many of these facilities.
and that's where it jacks
And
up.
preventive maintenance, but Commissioner Link, what I would caution you is that the maintenance cost on these facilities, just the base maintenance, is likely higher than any of the tiers we've presented to you.
Yeah.
So maybe what we do is we work with the attorney's office and we bring back some potential options around what we would recommend for a dollar lease and how y'all might think about that at the next meeting. And then we also bring back some of those dollars in terms of maintenance costs.
So maybe we extract the landscape maintenance cost, because that's considered like the public realm, maybe. Does that make sense?
And the only thing I'm going to consider when we look at this, we know, Actuatoria is East Athens, I believe they share. Oh, well, but East Athens Development Corporation, Actuatoria, they share site service. When we come back, we'll just keep that in mind.
Or maybe the maintenance.
So that's feasible. We come back and look at it after legal and staff.
I just want to clarify, is the consensus, am I correct in hearing that the consensus of this body is to proceed with $1 leases if possible?
If possible.
But also, just come back, also, let's look at the nonprofit that are charging, and see what that looks like, that's all.
In the maintenance.
In the main, let's see
I
what-
mean, and that's what we had come up with a determination. If you were bringing in a certain, what was it, more than
It was $3,600 a year.
then you were kicked into a
Different tier.
different tier.
And so, yeah, so the previous policy was actually incredibly complicated. It did account for shared facilities, whether you had landscape service or not, to what degree. So, for example, there's historic gardens at both the Welcome Center and Taylor Grady that are a bit more intensive. And then even the size of the facility, we're understanding that on a per square foot basis, it's more expensive to care for a smaller facility than a large one. That all came together in what we call the Frankenstein policy. And then we added in even additional things for the community benefits agreement discounts and income discounts. I would encourage you, don't go that direction. It was too much. It was too complicated and really unwieldy. Angel, can you remind me when the current leases expire?
Well, I mean, there was a 6-month extension, so December 31st is the expiration now, unless we get another extension. We like for them to all start July 1.
Right.
So we like them to be on the fiscal year.
So if you all are seeking more information, it sounds like you are, about maintenance costs and then maybe even the, rental revenues kind of stuff. We can bring that to you. You may want to consider today just saying, look, we're just going to do an amendment. We recommend an amendment to the leases for $1 for the rest of this fiscal year while we collect more information.
That makes sense.
That's a good idea.
Someone do a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, until July 1st.
We're gonna keep working on it though.
Well, yeah,
We'll keep on.
yeah.
We got backs coming in, Gene's over here, and we're not gonna make it out alive between Gene and Andrew.
I mean, I would say something when it comes to historic structures that have kind of like a greater community value beyond value. I mean, I feel like that should be considered as more of the government's responsibility in maintaining at least the exterior of those structures.
What happened with the cost? The tenant, restoring that property.
Yeah, but I'm talking like, costs as far as like HVAC, maybe even roofs and plumbing systems, things
And
like
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I didn't catch the first part of what you said, but
Well, when we talk about the, stuff like the Taylor Grady House, the Welcome Center, the Fire Hall, those are historic buildings. And they have a community benefit in the structures themselves as far as the character of the community or history. And I feel like the government in and of itself should take on responsibility of maintaining the exterior, at least, of those buildings, as far as like what goes on inside them and the functional apparatus of like HVAC systems and stuff like that we see, benefits from in occupying the building. Maybe that figures into the maintenance cost that they might take some responsibility. Does that make sense?
it does. I will say, we've gone through this even with an entity like, one question that we looked at early on was, well, what if we just did like a ground lease and the building's yours, you good luck, and then the same thing, it's a little bit, you get into this on cost recovery for maintenance. We want to be careful that we don't ever create an incentive for people to not seek the maintenance the buildings need. So for example, if they know they're going to call us and that's going to factor into some future amount they pay for rent, we want them to call us if maintenance is needed.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for like the whole ground leases. Especially on a historic facility, but anywhere, I wouldn't recommend if that was ever an asset we thought that we wanted to continue with. It's probably best that we give it the same level of service we give other public structures. Otherwise, we may receive back something that requires substantial reinvestment.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Like, I feel like we should take complete responsibility for the maintenance of the historic structures and consider the maintenance costs that might end up being borne by the entity to be primarily the more contemporary infrastructure in it, like AC, HVAC, electric and plumbing and this kind of.
Well, we already have a contract with, Taylor Grady House with language in it that they're going to help maintain.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as specific leases, when it comes to historic structures, when it comes to the details of the interior that get specific.
And we'll have plenty of time to dive into this. Even those things, the interior focused things, can result in the quality of the overall structure. So for example, if you're not replacing HVAC and then you have building up humidity, you could have a mold issue. We actually, I ended up recommending to the Broad Mayor Commission, it was accepted on Taylor Grady. Initially, we had said pest control was your problem no matter what. Well, then as we got into some dialogue with them on the lease, I put on the table that we would do termite control because it's much more important that we pay that little bit of preventive maintenance to have termite control than to have a tenant who doesn't do it and we end up with major structural issues.
So what I'm getting at is not that we just let them maintain it, but we determine the cost based.
Try to isolate.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
like, you know, don't just, you know, let them maintain it with whatever Joe Schmo contractor they want to pull up. But we determine the cost that we might charge, you know, beyond the dollar lease based on if we are to come up with something that's legally viable in a lease.
All righty.
The banks.
We'll move on to back. We're not gonna make any actions today on this. This is gonna be a very healthy discussion that's gonna take some time. But, we're gonna have the blessing of kicking us off on the BAC.
Yes, so we brought the whole team here. So Jeff, please come up to the table. Thank you, Central Services, for all their help. I appreciate you. James, thanks for joining the fun. Good to have you.
What the hell have I got myself into?
Week 2 is off to a good start. So we want to bring the whole team. Gene is here, Sherry, Jeff, Sarah's on her way, and Austin, and John. We've been meeting to talk about how do we best introduce this topic. You all shared a lot about BACs at your retreat, and we took note of what you shared. But what we wanted to do was just spend a little time covering the basics, right? So we're going to start with the attorney's office, and Gene, jump in whenever you want. They're going to talk about the charter. They're going to talk about the ordinance. They're going to talk about what is a BAC. So we're going to start high level, like what's a BAC, and how do we end up with the BACs we've got. Jeff is here as well. He's going to share a little bit about the numbers. We'll let you all guess how many BACs we have. So don't look at the last page of this document. See if you can guess within 5. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we hope to accomplish, what y'all hope to accomplish through this process at the end. So we got 20 minutes, and so that's our plan. Chair, if you're good, Sherry and John can take it away.
42.
That's the meaning of life. That would be so
That was
perfect
really
if that's
fun.
the right one.
And I will also, let
Did
me
you
just,
have my
from a
presentation?
preface
Okay.
type thing, I will tell you that this list is still a work in progress. We kind of keep adding information to this, but take it with a little bit of grain of salt.
Send it to you.
It's got a lot of information in there. And I won't reveal the number until Josh tells me to reveal it.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that after the attorney's office weighs in.
Okay, so it'll come through in a second and I'll have a PowerPoint, apologize. So just that you feel open that. But basically, we just put together a quick set of slides, and John may want to jump in at any point. So John, feel free to interrupt me whenever you do. But this is just designed to give you some quick kind of background information about BACs and how they're formed and how we've started conceptualizing ways that we might be able to, organize them and organize our thinking about them. So Cynthia, do you want to start it from the slideshow just so it's a full screen, and then we'll go to that second slide?
Can I ask a clarifying question though? So
Yes.
I see some stuff on this list here, like, the TAB committees and such as that. I mean, I was thinking we were just going to talk about committees that people apply for, that citizens apply for, and how we can best manage that. I didn't know we were going to jump into all of it.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about is the different authority that you do or do not have and kind of what you want to look at. So
Starting wide, and we're going to work. Y'all are going to help us filter.
Yep, exactly. So the first thing is really to say, what do we mean by when we say BACs? Because obviously BAC is an acronym. We typically think of it as boards, authorities, and commissions. Theoretically, somewhere else it could be boards, authorities, and committees, or councils, or some other C word. But when we talk about BACs generally, we're usually being quite inclusive. So boards, authorities, committees, commissions, task force, working groups, like any kind of body where there may be a mix of commission members, citizens, or singularly one of either, because we always have committees that are just made at the commission. And so for this conversation today, I'm going to try to be more specific usually than this kind of broad concept of BACs, but I want you just to be aware because sometimes we're not actually talking apples and apples when we say BACs. A lot of times we're talking apples and oranges. So there are some really important legal distinctions between these, and in my mind, and there certainly are different ways to look at it, but in my mind, it really boils down to how were they created, where does their authority come from, and then below that, I guess a sub level of interest to me is what do they actually do, at least in terms of this conversation. So when we're talking about dividing these up, I want to think about how did they come to exist, who put them together, and then we can talk about what they actually are set to accomplish at a later date. The other thing that is typically a relevant factor is the duration that this BAC is intended to exist. So we typically think of things that are appointed by the mayor, committees, task force, and working groups as being more temporary in nature. Now that isn't always the case. There's technically we're in a committee created by the mayor, I believe, certainly appointed by the mayor. But most of them that we have, I think, tend to have a limited duration, whereas a lot of our more substantial boards, authorities, and commissions are, existing kind of in perpetuity. Can we switch to the next slide? So let's talk about boards, authorities, and commissions. And I'm being particularly specific here about those three words because they are included in the charter under the powers of the commission. So we're talking about section 2-105 and specifically 2-105D. And so I've copied out the language here for you with some bolded language that kind of covers the highest points. But essentially it's that the commission may, by ordinance, and I point that out because there are a couple things that I think are intended under here that were created actually by a resolution. Technically, it should be by ordinance. And then this section actually gives you pretty wide-ranging authority to do whatever you want in terms of creating, changing, altering, combining, abolishing, consolidating, and redefining the manner of appointment, the membership, the powers and the duties of bureaus, boards, commissions, departments, divisions, authorities, offices, and agencies of the unified government. So a lot of that is related to staff, like our departments, the divisions, our offices. We don't really have bureaus that I'm aware of, but technically speaking, if you wanted to create a bureau, you have the authority to do so under a charter. So typically we're focusing on boards, authorities, and commissions. So examples, might be ACAC or the Oconee River Greenway, but there's tons of boards and authorities and commissions that were created by ordinance pursuant to this section. Can we get to the next slide? So we've emphasized that you have this broad authority, but there's a really important exception. Can you click one more time? Sorry. Forgot I would not have control over this. So some of our BACs, and in this case, again, I'm meaning boards, authorities, and commissions, they're unique because they are created pursuant to state law or by state law. So that's typically our authority. So we've included them in this list to be comprehensive, but we do want to emphasize that generally you all do not have any authority over authorities, great, no pun intended, and that's because of this next section. So this section 2-105E, and it explicitly states that despite what we've said in subsection D, you don't have any authority, or rather that section does not apply to any authorities or boards which were created by either a local constitutional amendment or by a local act of the General Assembly. So I've just listed a handful of them, but there are lots of those. So pretty much all of our authorities are going to fall under that heading. The Board of Elections falls under that heading. The Board of Tax Assessors falls under that heading. The Library Board. So there's a lot of different entities that kind of get carved out. Cynthia, can I get the next slide? So now we're going to talk about committees, task force, working groups, and other sort of ad hoc groups that may be created as a sort of a separate section. And they're a little bit different because the only authority that I'm aware of for creating these is under the mayor's authority in section 3-104E of the charter. And it's a little bit unique in the sense that, under the commission, you saw we have that long section that is really explicit about all the different powers you all have regarding different types of entities. Under the mayor's authority, it just says basically that he shall be able to make committee appointments. And so the rules of statutory interpretation tell us that we have to give meaning to everything that's written, like every word should have a meaning, should have been presumed essentially to have been intentionally chosen. And there's no other section that says who gets to create, abolish, modify, amend committees. So our best interpretation of the way the charter was written is that in addition to making appointments to committees, the mayor has the ability to create committees. And that's how we've been operating, as far as.
Not all the time.
In what way?
Well, there was if you remember the Wetlands Committee, when we discussed that was passed in a motion directing the mayor to appoint that committee.
So we're going to talk about that in a second. So this is the way it is supposed to work under the charter. Boards, authorities, commissions, bureaus, departments, etc., commissions.
They exist.
Committees appear to be under the authority of the mayor. And for whatever reason, I do not know why the charter didn't say that the commission can create committees by ordinance, but it didn't. And again, under the rules of statutory interpretation, we have to assume that they meant what they meant when they wrote it. And that if they wanted to include committees, they could have included committees because they reference committees later. Now, of course, we all know it could have been an oversight, but I can't make the assumption that it was an
I
oversight.
would assume that if the commission wants to create a committee and directs the mayor to do so, then that's the assumption I would make.
So I think it's probably a semantics issue, but let's get through this and we'll talk about it more towards another slide, okay? So in a similar vein, nothing in the charter talks about task force or working groups. That phrase is not used anywhere. So historically, the committees have or these types of groups have been sort of treated like committees, and that the mayor creates them and appoints them. And again, these are typically more temporary. So examples might be Athens Justice and Memory Project, or the Inclusionary Housing Working Group, or the recent Public Safety Civilian Oversight Task Force. Again, none of those groups use the word committee though, but they were created by the mayor. So next. So this is the slide that we were really talking about, Commissioner Hamby. So I think the problem is there's really a contradiction in terms and practice. So for various reasons, there's been a number of BACs that are referred to by different terms that are not consistent with the charter. So for instance, the Tax Allocation District Advisory Committees, they're created by ordinance. Arguably, they should have been called Tax Allocation District Advisory Commissions or boards, because the charter doesn't say committees for the commission, but that is how they were created. Community Tree Council, nothing in the charter talks about creating councils, so arguably that should have had a different name. The Athens in Motion Commission is a little bit different because it was actually created by resolution of the mayor and commission, not an ordinance.
The human relations.
It was created by ordinance.
Right.
So this was the point where we were actually all very sensitive to this issue. So that's why Commissioner Davenport might remember the Solid Waste Advisory Committee became the Solid Waste Advisory Commission. And that's just because we want to follow our charter and make sure that we're in line with it. Because I agree, it may just be semantics, but again, I have to assume that words have power and meaning. And so we're doing our best to try to make sure everything fits moving forward. We also have some unique entities that don't really fall into any of these, that they're created by contracts. So the EMS Oversight Committee, the only kind of authority for it is in the contract with the different hospitals and Oconee County. And then the Mall Area Redevelopment Committee is also created by a contract with the Board of Education. So again, some outliers out there. Can we move to the next slide?
You get a copy of this.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, we did not. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Cynthia.
You can send a copy after that.
Yes, absolutely. I'll send it to you. So we've been talking about how do we conceptualize these BACs, how do we organize them so that it's helpful to you. And so that's why you have this document that I think Jeff deserves the lion's share of the kudos, but I know Sarah and I have worked on this, and other staff have worked on this. So we've been trying to the best of our ability to figure out what BACs exist, how they were formed, to some extent how they operate, and whether they're even active or not, because we do have a number of entities like the Commission on Persons with Disabilities that just has been defunct for a very long time. As you can tell from this presentation, I do like to focus on how they're created because I think it'll help give us some clarity moving forward. Because we do have some commissions and some entities where, because they were not created by ordinance, there's some lack of clarity as to what they're actually supposed to be doing and what their authority is. But you all may want to think about these in a different way than what we have these structured. And I'll explain it kind of briefly. And Jeff, we have some other things he can chime in on. But, if we wanted to think about a different way to talk about them, you might want to have us break them down by which organizations or BACs, in this point, I'm saying very holistically, the BAC's term, which of them are just advisory, like they have no ability to direct or to sign contracts or to expend funds, purely advisory entities, versus entities like Deferred Compensation Board that actually has the ability to enter into contracts on behalf of the unified government in its ordinance, or groups like Planning Commission and HPC and Hearings Board, which have the ability to make binding decisions versus for matters that come before them. Similarly, I think you mentioned earlier, Commissioner Hamby, about, are we just focusing on BACs that come before the mayor and commission to be appointed? Well, that's actually a really broad group, because either the commission or the mayor actually appoints a lot of members to some of these state entities. So we just need some guidance on what would be helpful to you all to organize and to present this information and what you're interested in covering. So final slide. So the last thing, and I've done my best because Jeff did the final work on the tiers, but we tried to think about how do you conceptualize these. So the first number one is the tier system. So if you look on this first page, you'll see tiers, the second column. So that tier one is authorities and other state required BACs. So these are ones that are created by state law or pursuant to state law. And they're really independent entities like the Classic Center Authority. So we would not anticipate having much of a discussion about the tier one entities because we have little authority over them. Board of Elections is one of those. Tier two, I've suggested that should be boards and commissions created by ordinance by the commission, so that they clearly fall under that one section of the charter under the authority of the commission. And that tier three is those entities that would fall under the mayor's authority to create and to appoint. And then tier four, we don't actually have to have if you don't want it. But these are your outliers, so the contract created BACs that we talked about. And we also included the ARPA related BACs in there, but we could move that around. And then number two, and these are actually later in this document, they don't have a tier number. They have like a header that designates those, but those are your defunct BACs that either have naturally expired, like the police task force. Obviously the new group is in existence, so the task force to create it is no longer necessary, or like the Commission for Persons with Disabilities, which just is inactive. And then finally, we documented the mayor and commission committees like the GOC network seats.
So persons with disabilities,
Yeah,
that kind of needs to be active, doesn't it?
the defunct BACs, does the mayor have to announce it to end it? Like, how's that resolved? How's that terminated?
So I'll give one example. So the Clean and Renewable Energy Board, that was created to create the Clean and Renewable Energy Plan, and that is finished, right? So that's an example of, it wasn't, in my opinion, by ordinance, it was created to do a specific task, and it did it. And so we put it to bed. But I can't speak to the other ones. I think the Police Advisory Board is the same way. It was created to develop the idea of PSCOB, and once PSCOB was developed, it went away. The other two, I couldn't speak to at this point, but we'd come back on it. I think defunct might be too strong of a word. I think it's, inactive or ran its course might be better, but it's still listed as a BAC, and we need to clean that up if the idea is not to bring them back.
Well, and I apologize. So I haven't looked at this recently. So Commission on People with Disabilities actually has been included with the tier system. Yeah. So it's just listed as inactive, and there is the farthest column to the right talks about when they meet, and so you'll see it's inactive. So again, however you want us to refer to these, we can certainly make edits to this. And part of it is, I guess to answer your question, Commissioner Davenport, it really depends on how it was created. If the mayor created it, the mayor could end it. And, I don't think there's any clear guidance on how he has to do it. But like for the commission on persons with disabilities, that's created by ordinance. So it would take action of the commission to actually modify that or get rid of it. And I think, you'll find that probably the reason it doesn't exist right now is it requires 30 people. So that might be something.
And that might be something for consistency across all these that y'all get feedback on in the final.
And to that point too, Josh, if you don't mind, Chair, one thing that we need to get feedback on too, not only feedback on how the appointment process is made, but within the interview process. But, also like, I know several of these, like state authorities require some sort of training, the Economic Development Authority, and, but are some local ones do like planning commission and HPC.
Tax assessors does,
Taxes that are.
Board of Elections.
Like the planning commission and HPC do not, though, right?
I don't think they do.
I don't know, I've never staffed, under those committees, so I don't know if they do.
Because, the HPC is very detailed guideline oriented, and knowing those guidelines, having some sort of training that helps understand those guidelines.
And outline trainings for everyone. I think then there's general trainings too.
Yeah, they undergo training. There's.
I don't have,
Yeah, their training.
But what we can do is list the trainings that are needed for each specific VAC, I think is one literal we can do as well. So everybody knows going into it.
So, Mr. Jeff, you want to tell us a number and take on?
Sure. So to the point of, yes, there are some, ones like the ARPA groups are on here. And what we tried to encapsulate was everything that has something appointed by either the mayor, commissioner, or the mayor. But the total on here, not counting the defunct, which we'll sort of rename the committees, was 63, I believe, this morning. Now, I was doing editing on this up till about 12:40, so, but it's around that number. So, and in terms of the number of people, I did sort of a very rough, quick count. And again, with all of these, I think it was around 380 people as part of that, not counting the ones that are sort of commissioners or by office or chamber appointed, those kinds of things.
Those are citizens, man.
Those are various residents, yeah.
If they were full, that's how many, yeah?
Chair, if you don't mind, another thing as we're moving this discussion along, one thing that we might want to reconsider is allowing people just to serve on one board or authority. Because we've had several instances where some good folks have not been able to participate in 2 or 3, or at least 2.
Yeah, and some of them only meet like, once a year or something.
Dexter would have gone crazy. He was on every board authority. So,
And I kind of wonder if maybe some of these could be combined, or consolidated, their missions consolidated, especially ones that meet infrequently, but are in the same realm. I'm kind of thinking of like solid waste and keep Athens-Clarke County beautiful, like maybe we could combine their mission.
Yeah. Well, right now, though, we're still at that high level of our review looking at, I don't really like 63, good Jesus. I mean, like, we have been like just raining BACs for a while.
We've been telling people we thought it was around 50 and then kind of discovering them, so.
well, Gene, how many do we deal with that you have to deal with to
25, thereabouts, after that, I'm not counting them, though, probably 25.
see, and that's those are the ones I was hoping we would
Well,
discuss.
I mean, my main thing is, I think we could just streamline that process of application and actually use technology to make it a, very automatic process where we have access to a portal and people can upload their applications and the computer kind of does the calculating for us.
So how would y'all like us to approach the next meeting? What are the key things you want us to bring back?
Let me say it before we make it. So we know, number one, we gotta keep it, right?
Yeah.
Sure. We know though, by state law, we gotta keep number one, right? Is that correct, Sherry?
I mean, there may be ways to dissolve an authority, and I didn't prepare to talk about how to do that, but yeah, I wouldn't suggest any kind of discussion of
Yeah,
those for this context.
Well, I would say, let's concentrate maybe on 2 through 4.
Well, can I bring up this one point like that? And I've just gone back to the ones we interviewed. Like, I know we interviewed the hospital authority members, but basically that's the hospital sending us 2 names to choose from. And at this, with people that own the hospital, I don't know that we need to keep doing that process.
But they own hospital.
Just let the hospital.
People in their own hospital.
No, I know we do,
Right.
but I guess I'm just saying.
Yeah,
That's state law.
Yeah,
the required.
That's been litigated, so they've
Elected
got.
body has some.
I thought it changed a while.
Right.
I just roll off. Yeah, we still own, the county still own
I'm trying to get you 24G.
It might not be,
I'm hoping.
just say like $50.
Okay. This is such a broad, big topic. I don't even know what's the next step.
So one thing we might do is just start next meeting, Gene and others can describe kind of how we approach applications now, how we bring people into the process, and we can share what might not be working in the current process as well. We can bring ideas from staff's perspective on what we could focus on. Do you want to share something, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead and finish. I was just gonna mention.
Because I think what we've heard from y'all, we've heard from staff who are liaisons, and from our own experience here, you know, it would be great to be able to reduce the number, potentially. It would be great to emphasize the need to be done by ordinance and move some of these there. There needs to be consistency across the bylaws is another thing we heard. The handbook needs to be updated, so we could show you the current handbook as part of this. And training and recruitment, diversity, interviews. Those are some of the things y'all have shared over the past few months. Some get paid while others don't. So that's a conversation. Should ACC Gov employees be on these or not? That's something we'd like to talk about. But overall, it's just a little bit of everything, and we want to know kind of where y'all want to start the next meeting.
LRC, let them get.
It's a hard topic.
It's a hard topic.
I'm hearing from Gene.
Yeah, let's hear from Jean. From our perspective, she handles the bulk of the applications and the process. Hearings board, she got a question. I thought that was required by the state.
I would suspect that it is. John might be able to speak to it better. Can you take the PowerPoint presentation down in case John
But
is?
it's listed as a tier 2.
We were doing this chart on the fly, so there may be things we need to fix.
Yeah.
But
So-
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So for the hearings board, I mean, obviously, you know, most local governments have some sort of body that will hear variance requests. They're called different things depending on the local government. It's very common to have them. Those are quasi judicial decisions under the Z. I mean, those are a type of decision that's listed in the ZPL. But there's no requirement that something called a hearings board or a board of adjustment necessarily be enacted by any local government, at least not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So as commissioners, can we, in our leading up to the next month, can we look at some of the, the DACs and see what can be combined? And I didn't know, yeah. And then we look forward to hearing from Gene at our next meeting.
Sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.